the wind that blows across the vast ochre plains of Mars is a whisper, a ghost of a breeze in an atmosphere 100 times thinner than Earth's. It carries a fine, red dust that cloaks everything in a uniform, rust-colored shroud, a dust that has settled over dormant volcanoes, taller than any mountain on our home world, and into canyons that would dwarf the Grand Canyon. For millennia, this world has been a silent, solitary wanderer in the night sky, a crimson spark that ignited human curiosity and inspired tales of gods and aliens, of grand canals and dying civilizations. We invite you to join us on a journey to this world. And as we begin, we'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. So please leave a comment. Be sure to subscribe so you're notified when we release future stories. Our story is not one of fictional invaders, but of real explorers, sent from a planet teeming with life to one that held the tantalizing promise of a watery past. They were not living beings, but emissaries of humanity's insatiable curiosity, crafted from aluminum, wires, and silicon, yet endowed with a resilience that would capture the hearts of millions. They were twins, born of the same design in the clean rooms of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California, but destined for separate paths on the Martian surface. Their names were Spirit and Opportunity, and their mission was one of the most ambitious in the history of planetary exploration. Launched in the summer of 2003, they embarked on a voyage of nearly 500 million kilometers, which is about 300 million miles, across the cold vacuum of space. Their task was to act as robotic geologists, to read the ancient stories written in the rocks and soil of Mars, searching for clues to a long-lost era when water might have flowed freely, carving channels and pooling in craters, perhaps creating an environment where life could have once begun. Their creators had designed them for a mission of just 90 Martian days, a mere 3 months to survive the brutal temperature swings, the pervasive dust, and the intense radiation of a world without a global magnetic field to protect it. But as we shall see, these twin explorers would defy all expectations, embarking on a sprawling saga of discovery, survival, and adventure that would stretch on for years, forever changing our understanding of the fourth planet from the Sun. The grand saga of Spirit and Opportunity was not born in a sudden flash of inspiration, but was forged over decades in the mind of a man who had dedicated his life to the Red Planet. That man was Stephen Squires, a professor of astronomy at Cornell University, who, since the 1980s, had dreamt of sending a robotic field geologist to Mars. He envisioned a machine that could do more than just observe from a fixed position. He wanted a rover that could wander, that could climb hills, that could scrape away the weathered surfaces of rocks to see the pristine history locked inside. This vision was the seed from which the Mars Exploration Rover mission would grow. But its path to fruition was anything but easy. The late 1990s had been a heartbreaking time for Mars exploration. In 1999, two ambitious NASA missions, the Mars Climate Orbiter and the Mars Polar Lander, were lost within months of each other, one due to a simple but catastrophic mix-up between metric and imperial units, the other likely due to a software glitch that shut down its landing engines too early. The failures cast a long shadow over NASA, leading to a period of soul-searching and a reevaluation of how to approach the immense challenge of landing a spacecraft on another world. Yet, out of this crucible of disappointment, a new resolve emerged. The call went out for a new, bold mission, one that would be robust, redundant, and driven by a clear and compelling scientific question. For Squires and a community of planetary scientists, that question was one of the most profound we could ask of our celestial neighbor. Was Mars ever a wet world? The mission that took shape was built around a simple, powerful mantra: follow the water. The logic was elegant and inescapable. On Earth, wherever we find liquid water, we find life. While the Mars Exploration Rover mission was not designed to find life itself, it was designed to find the evidence of past environments that could have supported it. The rovers would be sent to search for the fingerprints of water, for minerals that only form in its presence, for rock formations carved by ancient streams or settled at the bottom of long-vanished lakes. To accomplish this, two landing sites were chosen with painstaking care, selected from orbit by the Mars Global Surveyor spacecraft. The first, for the rover named Spirit, was Gusev Crater, a massive depression some 160 kilometers, or about 100 miles, in diameter. Scientists believed that a great river channel, Myadam Vallis, had once emptied into this crater, potentially turning it into a vast crater lake billions of years ago. The second site, on the opposite side of the planet, was a flat, smooth region called Meridiani Planum. What made this place so alluring was a distinct mineral signature detected from orbit: crystalline hematite, an iron oxide that, on Earth, often forms in the presence of standing water. The stage was set for a geological detective story on an interplanetary scale. The task of building these twin explorers fell to the brilliant minds at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, in Pasadena, California. The challenge was immense, and the timeline was brutally short, driven by the unchangeable laws of orbital mechanics. Earth and Mars align favorably for a launch only once every 26 months, and the window in the summer of 2003 was the target. Missing it would mean a 2-year delay and a potential mission cancellation. Inside the high bay clean rooms at JPL, the rovers began to take shape. They were marvels of engineering, each about the size of a golf cart and weighing in at nearly 185 kilograms, roughly 400 pounds. They were designed to be tough, self-reliant explorers. 6 independently driven wheels made of aluminum, with a clever rocker-bogie suspension system, would allow them to traverse rocky terrain and climb slopes of up to 30 degrees. Their energy would come from the sun, captured by a flat, deck-like array of solar panels that would charge their lithium-ion batteries, a lifeline that would prove both a blessing and a vulnerability. Their brains were advanced computers, programmed to navigate complex terrain on their own, a critical necessity given the communication delay between Earth and Mars. A signal traveling at the speed of light could take as long as 20 minutes to cross the gulf between worlds, making real-time remote control impossible. The rover drivers on Earth would plan a day's route, but the rover itself would have to execute that plan, using its own cameras to spot and avoid obstacles. But the true heart of the mission was the suite of scientific instruments mounted on a robotic arm, known as the Instrument Deployment Device. This arm gave the rovers a human-like ability to reach out and study their surroundings in detail. At the end of it was a collection of tools that would make any geologist envious. There was the microscopic imager, a combination of a microscope and a camera that could reveal the fine-grained texture of rocks and soil. There were 2 spectrometers, the alpha particle X-ray spectrometer and the Mossbauer spectrometer, which worked together to identify the precise chemical and mineral composition of a target. And most exciting of all was the rock abrasion tool, or RAT. This device was a high-speed grinding wheel, studded with industrial diamond cutters, capable of drilling a hole 4.5 centimeters, or nearly 2 inches, across into the surface of Martian rocks. For the first time, we would not be limited to studying the reddish, oxidized veneer that coated everything on Mars. We could peek beneath the rust into the planet's pristine, ancient past. High atop a mast, standing 1.5 meters, or about 5 feet, tall, were the rover's eyes on the world. A pair of panoramic cameras, the PanCam. These would provide the stunning, full-color, 3-dimensional vistas of the Martian landscape that would captivate the world. The decision to build and send 2 rovers, not just one, was a masterstroke of strategy. It provided redundancy. If one failed during launch or landing, the entire mission would not be lost. It also doubled the scientific return, allowing for the exploration of 2 fundamentally different geological sites simultaneously. It was a testament to the renewed ambition of the Mars program. As the final pieces came together, one last, crucial detail remained. The rovers needed names. NASA held a nationwide student essay contest, and a third grader from Arizona named Sophie Collis submitted the winning entry. She wrote, "I used to live in an orphanage. It was dark and cold and lonely. At night, I looked up at the sparkly sky and felt better. I dreamed I could fly there. In America, I can make all my dreams come true. Thank you for the spirit and the opportunity." And so, the twin explorers were christened. They were no longer just me are A and me are B. They were spirit and opportunity, carrying with them not just the scientific hopes of a generation of researchers, but the dreams and aspirations of a young girl, and by extension, all of humanity. Their intricate machinery was infused with a purpose that transcended mere exploration. They were now characters in a story waiting to be told, silent pioneers poised on the edge of an interplanetary ocean, ready to begin their voyage to a distant shore. The summer of 2003 was a season of intense and focused energy, a critical period dictated not by terrestrial calendars, but by the celestial dance of planets. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the clean rooms amygdans buzzed with a quiet, meticulous urgency. Here, spirit and opportunity, having been named and celebrated, underwent their final preparations. They were no longer just rovers. They were now the precious cargo at the heart of a complex, multi-part spacecraft designed for a single, terrifying purpose: to survive a journey of hundreds of millions of kilometers, and then plummet safely onto the surface of another world. Each rover was nestled inside its own protective lander, a pyramid-shaped structure that would serve as its initial base on Mars. This lander was, in turn, cocooned within a remarkable piece of engineering called the aeroshell. This aeroshell was a flattened cone, looking much like a classic flying saucer, comprised of two parts: a lower heat shield to protect against the searing temperatures of atmospheric entry, and an upper back shell that housed the parachute and guidance rockets. Bolted to this entire package was the cruise stage, a flat, circular disc adorned with solar panels and small thrusters. This was the interplanetary bus, the life support system that would provide power, communications, and navigation for the 7-month voyage through the void. The entire assembly, a marvel of nested, interlocking components, weighed over 1,000 kilograms, or about 2,200 pounds. Once certified for flight, the two spacecraft were carefully packed and flown from California aboard United States Air Force C-17 cargo planes to the launch site, a strip of land on the coast of Florida that was itself a legend in the story of exploration, Cape Canaveral. This was hallowed ground for spaceflight, the same place from which the heroic Apollo missions had departed for the moon decades earlier. Now, two new launch pads, 17A and 17B, stood ready, each supporting a slender, powerful rocket that would be the first stage of the rover's epic journey. The chosen vehicle was the Delta II, a venerable and reliable workhorse of a rocket, standing nearly 39 meters, or 128 feet, tall. In the cavernous vertical integration facility, the spacecraft were carefully hoisted and mated to the third stage of their respective rockets, a final, delicate act of engineering before being sealed away forever from human hands inside the rocket's nose cone, or fairing. The first to go was Spirit. On the 10th of June, 2003, the Delta II rocket carrying MERA stood gleaming under the bright Florida sun. The countdown proceeded flawlessly, a rhythmic and familiar litany that belied the immense complexity and danger of the operation. At 1:34 in the afternoon, the main engine ignited, followed an instant later by the solid rocket boosters, which burst to life with a deafening roar that was more felt than heard. A wave of pressure that rolled across the swamps and waterways of the Cape. The rocket climbed from the pad on a pillar of fire and smoke, pushing against the full weight of Earth's gravity. For the teams in mission control, it was a moment of supreme tension and hope. The rocket accelerated, shedding its spent boosters as it carved a graceful arc into the blue sky. It pushed through the thin upper atmosphere, jettisoned its protective fairing, and delivered the spacecraft into a temporary orbit around the Earth. But its work was not done. After a brief coast, the third stage fired, a final, powerful kick that broke the bonds of Earth's gravity and hurled the Spirit spacecraft onto its trans-Mars trajectory at a speed of over 32,000 kilometers per hour, or about 20,000 miles per hour. The voyage had begun. Less than a month later, it was Opportunity's turn. Its launch, however, was fraught with challenges that tested the nerve of the entire team. The launch window was a narrow one, and a series of setbacks, from troubling weather patterns with high winds to a minor issue with the cork insulation on the rocket itself, caused a string of frustrating delays. Each scrubbed launch attempt ratcheted up the tension. The laws of celestial mechanics were unforgiving. If they could not get Opportunity off the ground soon, its trajectory to Mars would become longer and less efficient. And if the delay was too great, the window would close entirely for another 26 months. Finally, on the 7th of July, 2003, under the cloak of night, a new window of opportunity opened. At 11:18 p.m., the Delta II carrying MERB lit up the Florida coastline, a man-made star ascending into the darkness. The launch was perfect, a mirror image of its twins, and soon Opportunity was also on its way, trailing Spirit on a slightly different, faster path to the red planet. Now, two lonely travelers sailed through the immense, silent blackness of interplanetary space. Their journey was not a simple, straight line, but a long, curving arc, a coast of 487 million kilometers, or 302 million miles, governed by the gravitational pull of the sun. The cruise stage was now in command, its solar panels soaking up the distant sunlight to power the spacecraft's vital systems. The rovers themselves were in a state of hibernation, their electronic brains dormant to conserve energy and protect them from the harsh radiation of deep space. But the mission team back on Earth was far from idle. This was a period of intense vigilance. Through the Deep Space Network, a global system of giant radio antennas, engineers maintained constant contact with the two spacecraft. They monitored their health, checking temperatures, power levels, and system statuses, sending tiny bursts of commands across the vast emptiness. The most critical tasks during this 7-month cruise were the trajectory correction maneuvers, or TCMs. The initial launch, as powerful as it was, could never be perfectly precise. Over the vast distance to Mars, even the tiniest error in direction or velocity would multiply, causing the spacecraft to miss the planet by thousands of kilometers. To correct this, engineers would fire the small thrusters on the cruise stage in carefully calculated pulses, nudging the spacecraft back onto the perfect path. It was an act of celestial navigation of almost unimaginable precision, akin to firing a bullet from Los Angeles and having it hit a specific speck of dust on a window in Tokyo. Multiple TCMs were planned and executed for both Spirit and Opportunity, each one refining their course, guiding them ever closer to their designated landing zones. As the months passed and the kilometers ticked by, the two spacecraft drifted farther from home, two silent, sun-powered vessels carrying the hopes of their creators. They were now closer to Mars than to Earth. The long voyage was nearing its end, but the greatest challenge, the one that had doomed so many missions before, still lay ahead. Soon, they would have to awaken their robotic passengers and begin the final, terrifying plunge into the thin, cold Martian air. The silent 7-month coast across the interplanetary ocean was over. In the first weeks of January 2004, the planet Mars was no longer a distant point of light or a marbled disk in a telescope. It was a world vast and imposing, filling the view of the spacecraft's approach camera. For the twin explorers, and for the hundreds of men and women who had built and guided them, the most dangerous part of the entire mission was about to begin. The journey from the top of the Martian atmosphere to the surface was a meticulously choreographed, entirely autonomous sequence of events that had to be executed with inhuman perfection. It would last just under 7 minutes, a period the engineers at JPL had come to call, with a mixture of dread and respect, the 7 minutes of terror. It was terrifying because during that time, the spacecraft would be moving too fast and be too far away for any help from Earth. It was entirely on its own, a silent drama unfolding 170 million kilometers, or about 105 million miles, from home. The first to arrive was Spirit. On the 3rd of January, 2004, about 2 hours before its atmospheric encounter, the spacecraft received its final commands from Earth. Then, a profound silence fell over the mission control room at JPL. The controllers became spectators. The spacecraft's internal clock began the sequence. 15 minutes before hitting the atmosphere, explosive bolts fired, severing the connection to the cruise stage, the faithful companion that had powered and steered the craft all the way from Earth. It was now space junk, its purpose fulfilled, and it tumbled away as the aeroshell, containing the lander and the rover, plunged onward alone. The aeroshell oriented itself with its heat shield facing forward, a blunt shield against the inferno to come. It hit the upper wisps of the Martian atmosphere, traveling at a staggering 19,000 kilometers per hour, or nearly 12,000 miles per hour. Friction, even with this incredibly thin air, was a violent force. In just 4 minutes, the temperature on the outside of the heat shield soared to over 1,400 degrees Celsius, which is nearly 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than flowing lava. The shield, made of a special ablative material, glowed brilliantly as it vaporized, carrying the destructive heat away and protecting the precious cargo nestled deep inside. The rover, still sleeping in its metallic womb, was slammed by deceleration forces up to 6 times the pull of Earth's gravity. Inside mission control, the team could only watch their screens as data packets relayed through the Mars Global Surveyor orbiter, high above, painted a picture of the plunge. Cheers erupted as telemetry confirmed the spacecraft had survived the peak heating. But the ordeal was far from over. Having slowed to about 1,600 kilometers per hour, or roughly 1,000 miles per hour, still faster than the speed of sound on Mars, the spacecraft entered its next critical phase. At an altitude of about 10 kilometers, roughly 6 miles, a mortar cannon fired from the backshell, deploying a massive parachute. This was no ordinary parachute. It was constructed from ultra-strong fabrics called Dacron and Technora, designed to withstand the strain of opening at supersonic speeds. It unfurled in seconds, a 25-meter or 80-foot wide canopy that immediately billowed out, acting as a powerful brake and jolting the spacecraft violently once again. 20 seconds later, with the lander now descending at a much more manageable pace, the scorched and battered heat shield was jettisoned, exposing the bottom of the lander to the Martian sky for the first time. Suspended beneath the parachute on a 20-meter or 65-foot long bridle made of braided xylon, the lander activated its radar, sending pings of radio waves toward the ground to measure its altitude and descent rate with pinpoint accuracy. The ground was now rushing up to meet it. The final and perhaps most audacious, part of the landing sequence began. With just seconds to go, at an altitude of about 100 meters, or over 300 feet, giant airbags, stitched from multiple layers of a durable synthetic fiber called Vectrin, exploded into shape around the lander. In less than a second, the lander was encased in a protective cocoon of 24 interlocking spheres, transforming into a giant, high-tech beach ball. Almost simultaneously, 3 powerful solid-fuel rockets on the back shell, called rocket-assisted deceleration motors, fired, bringing the lander's downward descent to a dead halt, suspending it momentarily in the thin Martian air. A fraction of a second later, the bridle was cut. The lander, now a bouncing ball of inflated airbags, dropped the final 15 meters, or around 50 feet, to the surface. It hit the ground in Gusev Crater at a speed of about 50 kilometers per hour, or 30 miles per hour, and then bounced. It careened across the ancient crater floor, a series of gigantic, tumbling leaps, some reaching as high as a 5-story building. From the perspective of the rover inside, it was a wild, chaotic ride, tumbling end over end for over a kilometer. Back at JPL, the flow of data had ceased the moment the lander hit the surface. The orbiter had passed over the horizon. An agonizing 11-minute wait began, the time it would take for a new signal to be sent from the landed craft, travel across space, and be picked up by the antennas of the Deep Space Network. The room was thick with tension. Years of work, hundreds of millions of dollars, and the hopes of a global scientific community all rested on this moment. Then it came, a single, faint carrier wave signal. The spacecraft was alive. A wave of relief washed over the room, followed by an explosion of joy. Engineers hugged, scientists wept, and the NASA administrator, Sean O'Keefe, was swept up in the celebration. The signal confirmed that Spirit had landed safely, that its airbags were intact, and that it was on the surface of Mars. Over the next hour, as the airbags deflated and were painstakingly retracted, and the lander's 3 metallic petals opened like a flower, the first images began to trickle in, revealing a flat, rock-strewn plain under an alien, butterscotch sky. Spirit had arrived. 21 days later, on the other side of the planet, the entire heart-stopping drama was repeated with breathtaking precision. Opportunity, after its own flawless 7-month voyage, endured its own 7 minutes of terror, landing so accurately in Meridiani Planum that it came to rest inside a small, shallow crater. A 1-in-a-million shot that would prove to be a scientific goldmine. The twin explorers, humanity's robotic emissaries, were now both safe on the Red Planet, their grand journey across the void complete, their great adventure in the red dust about to begin. 12 days after its tumultuous arrival, having methodically checked its systems and unfolded itself into its full stature, Spirit was ready for its first taste of Martian soil. On the 15th of January, 2004, it carefully rolled down the ramp of its lander and onto the floor of Gusev Crater, becoming the first mobile explorer in this vast, ancient basin. The world that greeted it was starkly beautiful and profoundly puzzling. The panoramic cameras revealed a flat, wind-swept plain, littered with jagged, dark-colored rocks that stretched to a low-lying set of hills on the horizon, some 3 kilometers, or nearly 2 miles, away. For the science team back on Earth, this initial view was a source of both excitement and concern. They had chosen Gusev Crater because orbital images suggested it was once a lake, fed by the great Ma'adim Vallis channel. They had expected to land on fine-grained sediments, the compressed mud of an ancient lake bed, rich with the telltale minerals that form in water. Instead, they saw volcanic rock everywhere. Spirit's first major act as a field geologist was to approach a football-sized rock the team nicknamed Adirondack. The rover extended its robotic arm, and for the first time on Mars, the rock abrasion tool, or RAT, went to work. Its diamond-tipped grinders whirring in the thin air to cut a small, clean hole into the rock's weathered surface. The spectrometers then analyzed the fresh interior, and the results confirmed what the images suggested. This was olivine-rich basalt, a common volcanic rock. Rock after rock on the plains told the same story. This was not a lake bed. It was a lava plain. A sense of scientific disappointment began to creep in. Had they chosen the wrong landing site? Was the water story of Gusev a mirage? It was then that Steve Squires and the mission planners made a bold and mission-altering decision. The original plan had been to explore the plains near the lander for the entire 90-day mission. But the real prize, the key to unlocking Gusev's past, might lie in those distant hills. If the crater had once been a lake, the layers of sediment they were looking for might be preserved in an older, uplifted section of the crater rim, exposed in those hills. It was a huge gamble. The journey would be long and arduous, pushing the rover far beyond its design specifications. But the potential reward was too great to ignore. They christened the destination the Columbia Hills, a poignant and fitting tribute to the 7 astronauts who had been lost aboard the space shuttle. Columbia, just 1 year earlier. The epic trek began. Spirit, designed to travel perhaps a few hundred meters in total, set out on a cross-country marathon. Driving was a slow, deliberate process. The rover drivers at JPL would spend their day meticulously planning a route, identifying hazards, and then beam the commands to Mars. The next day, while they slept, Spirit would execute the drive autonomously, its hazard avoidance software steering it around impassable rocks. It crept across the plains at a top speed of just 5 centimeters per second, or about 2 inches per second. For over 5 months, far exceeding its original planned lifetime, Spirit drove. It was a testament to the rover's endurance and the team's skill. Finally, in June of 2004, it reached the base of the Columbia Hills. The ascent was even more challenging than the journey across the plains. The slopes were steep, and the terrain was treacherous. But as Spirit climbed, the geology began to change. The rocks were different here, more varied, showing signs of alteration and weathering that were absent on the plains below. The rover was reading the pages of Mars's history, and the story was getting more interesting. Then, in March of 2006, after more than 2 full Earth years of exploration, disaster loomed. The right front wheel, after rotating over 13 million times, suddenly stopped working. The motor had failed, and the wheel was now a dead weight, an arthritic limb that the rover had to drag behind it. The engineering team on Earth was devastated. It seemed like a crippling blow. They quickly developed a new driving technique, forcing Spirit to drive backwards on its 5 good wheels, dragging the useless one through the red soil like a plow. This setback, however, would lead to one of the mission's most stunning and serendipitous discoveries. As the lame wheel gouged a shallow trench in the ground, it churned up bright, almost white soil from just beneath the surface. The team, intrigued, commanded Spirit to halt its climb and use its instruments to analyze this strange material. The results were electrifying. The soil was over 90% pure silica. On Earth, concentrated deposits of silica like this are formed in one of 2 primary ways. Either in a hot spring environment, where hot water dissolves silica and then deposits it as it cools, or in a fumarole, where acidic steam from a volcano leaches away other minerals, leaving the silica behind. Both scenarios pointed to one inescapable conclusion. This spot in the Columbia Hills had once been a hydrothermal environment, a place where water and volcanic heat had interacted. It was the smoking gun. Spirit had found the evidence of a past watery environment at Gusev, not the calm lake they had first expected, but perhaps a far more dynamic and potentially life-sustaining one. The plucky rover, now a seasoned mountaineer, continued its exploration of the hills for 3 more years. It summited a peak named Husband Hill, becoming the first robotic or human explorer to climb a mountain on another world. It investigated a fascinating, layered rock formation called home plate, which scientists believe is the eroded remnant of an ancient, explosive volcanic feature. It survived Martian winters that plunged temperatures to minus 100 degrees Celsius, or minus 148 degrees Fahrenheit, by carefully positioning itself on sun-facing slopes to maximize the energy reaching its increasingly dust-covered solar panels. But time and the harsh Martian environment were taking their toll. In May of 2009, while driving near home plate, Spirit's wheels broke through a crusty surface layer of soil and sank into a patch of soft, fine material hidden beneath. The team named the location Troy. For a rover with only 5 working wheels, it was a deadly trap. For the next 8 months, the team at JPL worked tirelessly to free their stranded explorer. They built a sandbox at the lab, filling it with a special powdery material that mimicked the Martian soil, and used a test rover to meticulously try out escape maneuvers, inch by agonizing inch. But every command sent across the solar system, every carefully planned wheel spin, failed to give Spirit the purchase it needed. It was hopelessly stuck. The mission, however, was not over. In January of 2010, NASA officially redesignated Spirit. It was no longer a rover. It was a stationary research station. From its final position at Troy, it continued to study the Martian weather, the composition of the surrounding soil, and the subtle wobble of the planet's rotation, which could provide clues about the nature of its core. But as the southern Martian winter approached, Spirit faced its greatest challenge. Stuck in the sand, it could not maneuver to a sun-facing slope as it had in winters past. The sun crept lower in the sky each day, and the precious solar energy needed to run its heaters and keep its electronic heart alive dwindled. The last communication from Spirit was received on the 22nd of March, 2010. After that, there was only silence. For more than a year, the Deep Space Network listened, sending commands, hoping that with the coming of spring, Spirit would reawaken. But the call was never answered. The long Martian winter had been too much. Spirit now rests in the soil of Troy, a silent, dust-covered monument to a mission of incredible perseverance and discovery, its journey complete. While Spirit was engaged in its long, arduous quest for clues in the volcanic plains of Gusev, its twin sister on the other side of Mars was having a very different experience. If Spirit's story was a hard-won detective novel, a slow burn of accumulating evidence, Opportunities was a tale of immediate and spectacular revelation. Its journey began on the 25th of January, 2004, with a landing so precise, so incredibly lucky, it would be talked about by planetary scientists for decades to come. Mission planners had aimed for the flat, featureless expanse of Meridiani Planum. But through sheer chance, the bouncing, airbag-cushioned lander came to rest inside a small, shallow impact crater, just 22 meters, or about 72 feet, in diameter. It was a cosmic hole-in-one. The team named it Eagle Crater, and it was a geological gift. On the vast, dust-covered plains, the bedrock, the ancient storybook of Mars, was buried. But here, inside this small crater, the impact had punched through the overlying soil, exposing a pristine outcrop of layered rock in the crater's inner wall. Opportunity had landed, with its primary scientific objective sitting just a few meters away. As the first images from Opportunity's panoramic cameras stitched themselves together on the screens at JPL, a collective gasp went through the room. The floor of the crater was not covered in the jagged, dark volcanic rocks Spirit had seen. Instead, the soil was a dark, reddish gray, and scattered all over it, like marbles tossed onto a dusty floor, were countless little gray spherules. The scientists were mesmerized. They were small, ranging from 100 micrometers to over 6 millimeters, or about 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and they were astonishingly uniform in shape. The team affectionately nicknamed them blueberries. Their perfect roundness suggested they had been formed by some process involving water, likely as concretions growing within porous, water-soaked rock, much like pearls form inside an oyster. The excitement was palpable, but the blueberries were just the appetizer. The main course was the tantalizing outcrop of bedrock just 7 meters, or about 23 feet, away. Opportunity wasted no time. It rolled off its lander and made the short drive to the rock face, a target the team named El Capitan. It extended its robotic arm and began the most important geological survey in the history of Mars exploration. The microscopic imager revealed the rock was made of finely laminated layers, some no thicker than a credit card. These delicate layers were exactly what one would expect to see in rocks formed from sediments settling at the bottom of a body of water. Within these layers, the imager saw the blueberries again, but this time they were still embedded in their parent rock, confirming they were not from some other location, but had formed right here. The rover then pressed its spectrometers against the rock, using X-rays and gamma rays to determine its elemental and mineral composition. The data that streamed back across the solar system was the eureka moment the entire mission had been designed for. The rock was rich in sulfates, particularly a mineral called jarosite. This was the smoking gun. On Earth, jarosite, a hydrated potassium iron sulfate mineral, almost exclusively forms in the presence of acidic standing water. The combination of the physical evidence, the fine layering, and the spherical concretions, with the chemical evidence of water-lane sulfate minerals, was irrefutable. Opportunity had, in its very first act, proven that this part of Mars had once been drenched in liquid water. The team could now piece together a detailed history of Meridiani Planum. Billions of years ago, this barren plain had been a salty sea or a shallow, ephemeral lake. The sulfate-rich bedrock had been laid down as sediment in this body of water, and the blueberries had slowly formed within it. At some later point, the water evaporated, leaving behind a vast, salty playa, a landscape not unlike the salt flats of Utah or Bolivia today. Having exhausted the scientific riches of its landing crater, Opportunity peeked its head over the rim and saw the vast, flat plain stretching before it. The mission, now a resounding success, was far from over. its 90-day warranty was just a starting point. The team set its sights on a new destination, a much larger crater, some 750 meters, or nearly half a mile away, which they named Endurance Crater. The journey was the rover's first long-distance trek, and it proved that Opportunity was a robust and capable explorer. Upon reaching Endurance, the team faced a risky decision. The crater was deep, with steep, sandy slopes. Driving in was a significant risk. They might not be able to get back out, but the scientific allure of its deeper, older rock layers was too strong to resist. They decided to take the chance. For 7 months, Opportunity carefully navigated the inner slopes of Endurance, a Martian mountaineer descending into the planet's past. It found thicker layers of the same sulfate-rich rock seen in Eagle Crater, confirming that the watery environment had not been a fluke or a brief event, but a long-lasting, widespread chapter in Mars's history. After successfully climbing back out of Endurance, the seemingly indestructible rover began a truly epic journey, one that would redefine the meaning of a planetary mission. The team targeted an even larger crater, Victoria, more than 7 kilometers, or over 4 miles, away. For 21 months, Opportunity drove, its wheels churning through the red sand. It survived dust storms and harsh winters. Its mission extended again and again by the remarkable winds of Mars. Periodically, dust devils would sweep across the plains and, by pure chance, blow the accumulating red dust off the rover's solar panels. Each cleaning event was like a magical refueling, wiping the slate clean and restoring the rover's power levels to near-factory condition. This fortuitous Martian housekeeping was the secret to Opportunity's incredible longevity. In September of 2006, it finally reached the scalloped rim of Victoria Crater, a feature nearly 800 meters, or half a mile, across. It spent the next 2 years circumnavigating the rim, peering down at the dramatic cliffs and studying the exposed rock layers from above, a robotic tourist on the edge of a Martian Grand Canyon. But even Victoria was not the final destination. The science team proposed one last audacious goal: a colossal crater named Endeavour, a staggering 22 kilometers, or nearly 14 miles, in diameter. The journey would take years and push the aging rover to its absolute limits. Orbital data suggested that the rim of Endeavour Crater contained rocks far older than any Opportunity had yet seen, including clay minerals that form in less acidic, more neutral water. An environment that would have been even more friendly to the potential origin of life. It was a chance to look back into an even earlier, and perhaps more habitable, epoch of Martian history. In September of 2008, the little rover turned its wheels south and began the greatest marathon in the history of space exploration. Its sights set on a distant mountain range of a crater rim, leaving a set of lonely tracks in the red dust that stretched back for miles and years into its own remarkable past. The 90-day warranty that Spirit and Opportunity carried to Mars was a testament to the cautious pragmatism of engineers who understood the profound hostility of the Martian environment. They fully expected that within about 3 months, a fine layer of red dust settling from the thin atmosphere would coat the solar panels, slowly starving the rovers of the energy they needed to survive. This gradual accumulation was seen as an unavoidable terminal diagnosis. But Mars, it turned out, had a surprise in store. The planet that was trying to kill the rovers with its dust and its cold would also, paradoxically, provide the very means for their salvation. The first signs of this unexpected gift came a few months into the mission. As predicted, power levels on both rovers began to decline as a fine film of dust settled on their solar arrays. Then, one Martian morning, the team at JPL, analyzing the daily telemetry from Spirit, saw something that made them blink in disbelief. The rover's energy production had not decreased. It had surged, almost back to the levels it had on landing day. The data was not a mistake. Puzzled, the engineers and scientists looked for an explanation. The answer came from the rover's weather data and images. A gust of wind, likely a swirling vortex of air known as a dust devil, had passed directly over the rover, sweeping the panels almost perfectly clean. It was a moment of pure serendipity, a Martian housekeeping service they had never dared to dream of. These cleaning events would become a defining feature of the mission, the secret to the rover's incredible longevity. They were unpredictable gifts from the Martian atmosphere, granting new leases on life time and time again, turning what was designed as a 3-month sprint into an extraordinary, decade-long marathon. While the dust was a persistent threat, the cold was a relentless and cyclical enemy. Mars has seasons, much like Earth, but its winters are far more severe. As the rover's locations in the southern hemisphere tilted away from the sun, the days grew shorter, and the nights became lethally cold, with temperatures plummeting to below minus 100 degrees Celsius, or minus 148 degrees Fahrenheit. This was a cold so intense it could freeze carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and, more critically, could crack electronics and drain batteries permanently. Survival through the long, dark winter became an annual battle of energy management. The team on Earth became masters of conservation, turning their rovers into robotic hibernators. Each winter, they would meticulously search for a suitable north-facing slope, a winter haven, where the rover could tilt its solar panels as directly as possible toward the low-hanging winter sun. All non-essential activities would cease. Driving stopped, science operations were curtailed, and the rovers spent most of their time in a deep sleep, drawing just enough power to run their master clock and a suite of survival heaters, tiny electric warmers that kept the central electronics from freezing solid. It was a delicate balancing act, a race to soak up enough sunlight during the short day to survive the killing cold of the long night. For 3 years, the rovers and their human partners mastered this rhythm of survival, enduring the dust and the cold. But in the middle of 2007, Mars unleashed a new threat, a danger so profound it threatened to kill both rovers at the same time. It began as a series of regional dust storms, which were not uncommon. But these storms did not dissipate. Instead, they merged and grew, feeding off each other until they exploded into a single planet-encircling tempest. Within weeks, the entire globe was shrouded in a thick, impenetrable haze of red dust. From the perspective of the rovers on the ground, the sun, which was their very lifeblood, vanished from the sky. The air itself was not a violent, howling gale, as one might imagine. The Martian atmosphere is too thin for that. The danger was far more insidious. It was a planetary blackout. The atmospheric opacity, a measure of how much sunlight is blocked by dust, skyrocketed. Sunlight reaching the surface dropped by more than 99%. For 2 solar-powered machines, it was a waking nightmare. On opposite sides of the planet, both Spirit and Opportunity were plunged into a deep, dark twilight. Opportunity, caught out on the flat plains of Meridiani on its long trek toward Victoria Crater, was particularly vulnerable. Its power levels crashed to dangerously low levels, the lowest ever seen on the mission. The team sent an urgent command, ordering the rover to cease all communication for several days to conserve every last milliwatt of power. It was a desperate gamble. With no signal, they would have no idea if the rover was still alive. At JPL, the mood was grim. The teams could only watch as satellite images showed the planet-girdling storm raging, and wait in silence, hoping the batteries would hold out. Spirit, nestled in the Columbia Hills, was in equally grave danger. Its daily energy intake fell to a mere fraction of what it needed to operate. Like its twin, it was commanded into a state of minimal activity, hunkering down to weather the storm. A planetary siege was underway. For over 6 weeks, the global dust storm raged. The long silence from Mars was agonizing for the teams on Earth. Finally, in early August, orbital images showed the first signs that the storm was beginning to abate. The haze started to thin. The team held its breath and sent a command to Opportunity, tentatively asking it to respond if it could. An agonizing wait followed, stretching the minutes out into an eternity. Then, a whisper of a signal came back across the gulf of space. Opportunity had survived. A few days later, Spirit also checked in. A wave of profound relief and jubilation washed through mission control. Against all odds, the twin explorers had endured the darkest trial of their lives. They had faced the worst Mars could throw at them, and had emerged from the darkness, dusty and depleted, but alive and ready to continue their epic journeys. Their survival was a testament not only to the fortuitous winds, but to the robust design of the machines and the unwavering dedication of the people who guided them, a partnership that had proven strong enough to conquer a world. Even for machines built with such astounding resilience, the long Martian years could not be held back forever. The accumulated wear of thousands of days, the accumulation of countless miles on their odometers, and the unending assault of the harsh environment would eventually bring their incredible journeys to an end. For Spirit, the long goodbye began not with a sudden failure, but with the slow, agonizing struggle in the soft sand of Troy. After becoming hopelessly ensnared in May of 2009, the rover that had climbed a mountain was now a prisoner of a few feet of treacherous soil. The transition from a mobile explorer to a stationary science platform was a bittersweet one for the team, but it was a testament to their unwavering commitment to extract every last bit of science from their stranded pioneer. Spirit spent its last Martian summer and autumn diligently studying its surroundings, its instruments providing a unique, in-depth analysis of a single location, a kind of geological deep dive it could never have performed while on the move. But as the sun began its inexorable southward crawl, signaling the approach of its fourth Martian winter, the team knew Spirit was in mortal peril. Unlike previous winters, it was not perched on a life-saving, sun-facing slope. It was stuck on level ground, its solar panels fixed at a shallow angle. The energy situation was dire, far worse than anything it had faced during the 2007 global dust storm. The team calculated that as the winter solstice approached, there would be a long period where the rover would likely not have enough power to run its survival heaters, let alone communicate with Earth. They prepared it for a long, silent hibernation, sending up final commands to conserve every joule of energy and hunker down for the killing cold. The last time Earth heard from Spirit was on the 22nd of March, 2010. After that, the line went dead. The silence was expected, but no less painful. The team held on to a sliver of hope. Perhaps, they thought, Spirit would enter a low-power fault mode, shutting everything down except its master clock, and then attempt to reawaken when the sun returned in the spring. As the days lengthened again in the southern hemisphere, the listening campaign began. The powerful antennas of the Deep Space Network were pointed toward Gusev Crater, hailing the silent rover, listening intently for any faint whisper in reply. They hailed it over 1,300 times, but the calls were met with an unbreaking silence. The long, cold winter had been too much. On the 25th of May, 2011, NASA held a final, somber press conference and announced the end of the Spirit mission. After 6 years, 2 months, and 19 days of exploration, more than 25 times its designed lifespan, the little rover that could was declared lost. It rests today in the sands of Troy, a silent monument to endurance, its camera mast likely pointing toward the Columbia Hills it so bravely conquered. On the other side of the planet, opportunity, the Energizer. Bunny of Mars just kept going. In August of 2011, after a grueling 3-year trek, it finally reached the rim of Endeavour Crater, its final spectacular destination. This was a place unlike any it had seen before. The rocks here were ancient, dating back to the earliest epochs of Martian history. And just as orbital data had predicted, they contained the unmistakable chemical signatures of clay minerals, evidence of a past environment with neutral pH water, a far more life-friendly setting than the acidic seas of Meridiani's past. For the next 7 years, Opportunity explored the rugged, mountainous terrain of Endeavour's rim, a landscape that felt like a completely new mission. It analyzed veins of the mineral gypsum, another clear sign of water having percolated through cracks in the rock. It drove into a valley that may have been carved by flowing water, a place nicknamed Perseverance Valley. By early 2018, the rover had driven over 45 kilometers, or 28 miles, shattering every record for off-world travel. It was now approaching its 15th year of service, a staggering achievement for a machine designed to last just 3 months. But Mars was preparing one final, planet-wide assault. In late May of 2018, orbiters detected the beginnings of a new dust storm. It started small, but unlike the storm of 2007, this one grew with terrifying speed and intensity. Within 2 weeks, it had become another global event, but it was far darker and more powerful than the one the rovers had survived a decade earlier. At Opportunity's location, the sky turned to an impenetrable, inky black. The atmospheric opacity soared to a level more than twice as severe as the previous storm. The sun was completely blotted out. On the 10th of June, 2018, Opportunity sent its last coherent message back to Earth. The telemetry showed its power levels were critical and dropping fast. The rover's automated brain, recognizing the emergency, was likely shutting down all systems to conserve the last vestiges of battery power, hoping to ride out the darkness. The storm raged for months. When the skies finally began to clear in late September, the team at JPL immediately began a desperate attempt to contact their lost explorer. They knew the chances were slim. The rover had endured a prolonged, deep cold without its heaters, a condition it was never designed to survive, but they had to try. For the next 8 months, they conducted an exhaustive listening campaign, a vigil filled with hope and heartbreak. They pinged the rover with commands from the Deep Space Network over 1,000 times. They tried different frequencies and different times of the Martian day. They broadcast songs to wake the rover up, including Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles and Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go by Wham. The control room was filled with engineers and scientists who had spent their entire careers working with OPI, as they affectionately called it. They had raised their children, earned PhDs, and grown gray alongside the rover's long journey. It was more than a machine to them. It was a colleague, a companion on a great adventure. But the Martian skies remained silent. The final, heartbreaking command was sent on the evening of the 12th of February, 2019. It was a song, Billie Holiday's "I'll Be Seeing You." The next morning, with no reply, the mission was officially declared over. The long goodbye had reached its end. In a room filled with tears and applause for a life well lived, the team bid farewell to the little rover that had turned a 3-month mission into a 15-year epic, a machine that had become the enduring spirit of opportunity itself. Thus, the grand odysseys of spirit and opportunity came to their quiet, dignified ends. They now rest in eternal silence beneath a pale pink sky, two silent emissaries that became permanent residents of the world they were sent to explore. Their story began with a modest goal: to survive for 90 Martian days and travel a few hundred meters, hoping to find a few tantalizing clues about the history of water on Mars. But what they achieved was a saga of exploration that transcended all expectations. For years that stretched into a decade and a half, they roamed the red plains, climbed mountains, and descended into craters, transforming our entire understanding of our planetary neighbor. Before their arrival, Mars was a planet of theories and tantalizing hints from orbit. Spirit and opportunity made it a tangible world, a place of texture and history. Spirit, the gritty mountaineer, endured a frustrating start on the volcanic plains of Gusev crater, but persevered, and through a combination of determination and sheer luck, uncovered the remnants of an ancient hydrothermal system in the Columbia Hills, a place of hot springs or volcanic vents that could have been a cradle for life. Opportunity, the lucky geologist, hit the scientific jackpot on its very first day, landing in a crater that held the definitive proof of a long-ago salty sea, rewriting the first chapter of Mars's watery history. Together, they drove a combined distance of over 52 kilometers, or more than 32 miles, sending back over 340,000 raw images that revealed Mars in all its stark and stunning beauty. They were more than just robotic tools. They became characters in a global adventure, their struggles and triumphs followed by millions. We felt the thrill of their discoveries, the anxiety of the long winters, and the heartbreak of their final silences. They proved that the reach of human curiosity is not limited by the bounds of our own atmosphere. They were the eyes and hands for a generation of scientists, and their legacy is etched not only in the red dust of Mars, but in every subsequent mission that follows in their tracks, each one building upon the foundational knowledge they provided. They were, in the end, two of the greatest explorers of our time, leaving a story of resilience and discovery that will inspire future generations to look up at that crimson point of light in the night sky and continue the journey.